Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to It's About Equity, Not Kindness, Accessible Inclusive Grant-Making Practices, Part 2 of our Disability Inclusion and Philanthropy webinar series. My name is Viridiana Romero. I go by Viri. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm NCG's Manager of Strategic Initiatives. I'm calling from the ancestral lands of the Ohlone, Muwekma, and Tamian Nation, also known as San Jose, California. I'm a light-skinned Latina with long brown hair, wearing a burnt orange sweater with a bronze and green necklace. I have a white blurred background with some shadows of my plant behind me. So NCG is on a disability justice learning journey. I share my visual descriptors as one effort to make this introduction more accessible. We recognize the access needs of people with disabilities, and this is just a small step to acknowledge and help individuals with low or no vision. This and many of the practices we will discuss today are a part of racial equity. It is intersectional with gender, ability, sexual orientation, and class, which is why we are having today's important discussion to ensure that accessibility and disability inclusion are part of intersectional and equitable grant-making practices. So we have an amazing panel for you all today. We're excited to partner and co-sponsor with Ability Central, the Wood Foundation, and Philanthropy California, which is a statewide partnership between Northern California Grantmakers, Southern California Grantmakers, and Catalyst of Imperial Counties in San Diego, to host this incredible webinar series around disability inclusion and philanthropy. We're especially grateful for Ability Central's leadership and expertise in making these conversations possible. I will pass the mic to Jessie Galloway, Program Officer at Ability Central, who will be moderating today's discussion and will also share any logistics and notes on accessibility for our time together. Jessie, over to you.
Thank you. I'm Jessie Galloway, she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman in my 40s with short curly red hair. I'm wearing round tortoiseshell glasses, and I have on a brown shirt under a gray sweater. My background is my colorful but messy home office. I want to acknowledge both the ancestral land of the Hopewell people that I reside on in what's known as Columbus, Ohio, and the Ohlone land that Ability Central's headquarters resides in. I am really looking forward to our conversation today. Joining me is Ryan Easterly and Nikki Brown Booker. Sort of a brief overview. We're going to start with a video from the President's Council on Disability Inclusion and Philanthropy. After the video, I will lead the panel conversation between the three of us, and feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions throughout the presentation. At the end of the session, we will answer any questions, and we also, I think all three of us have a few minutes. So if it goes a little over, and we'll also follow up with questions, I'm happy to answer things via email afterward. So with that said, I'd like to kick off the video. And let's see, I'm going to do this like this. All right. Okay. See if that works.
A series of interviews.
My name is Dessa Kazma. I'm a little person who often uses a wheelchair. Disability communities have so much to offer. You know, we're used to improvising and adapting and being creative because we have to be to survive. And so much of that is about not living in a society that was thinking about us or only thought of us as an afterthought, and not being able, as a result, to find adequate housing, transportation, education, jobs, social groups.
My name is Ryan Easterly. I am a Black man with a teal and white striped shirt wearing glasses. The ADA is great, but the real work, the real challenge is overcoming those attitudinal barriers to get people to see me for me, everything I bring to the table, and not just the disability.
My name is Alice Wald, and I'm wearing a mask attached to a tube that's used to help me breathe. I really do believe that grant makers, foundations, do have a role in showing what diversity is. A lot of people don't associate disability with diversity. They absolutely should, because people with disabilities are present in every diverse community. That would be my challenge to you, is to really seek out people with disabilities and prepare to be uncomfortable. I think that's something that we all have to do, to really open our minds and to really be able to see outside of ourselves.
My name is Maddie Ruvalo. I am a young white woman with brown curly hair. I have a chronic illness called POTS. Inclusion is not just funding disability rights organizations, although obviously that is incredibly important. It's also making sure that there are disabled people within your own organizations.
My name is Rebecca Coakley. I am wearing a Prince purple dress because I'm a huge Prince fan, and wearing a jacket that's designed by Kathy Woods, who is the first little person fashion designer in the country. Here would be a couple of my suggestions for funders about how to live your values. Hiring people with disabilities in roles that are not just disability specific. Hiring people with disabilities in your HR spots, in your women's bureaus, in your logistics team, on your communications side, across the board. How that changes things. How just simple engagement changes the stigma that people have around disability rights.
My name is Carrie Gray. I am a young adult Black woman sitting in a chair. On my right leg is a prosthetic limb, and I am wearing a red romper with a black head wrap. If you're trying to build practices around people with disabilities, then you should definitely have people with disabilities in the room making decisions with you. We found it extremely helpful to work directly with recruiters, with supervisors, with hiring managers, and having conversations of what does it mean to create inclusive hiring practices, and what does it mean to be the type of supervisor where you can have these type of conversations with your employees about, I need an accommodation, I need to talk to you about that. Well, this
Just see flagging that it did freeze on our end. Hi, folks. Thank you for your patience as we figure out this video technical issue. And we appreciate all the Q&A questions already in the chat.
Okay, well, it's not letting me, I'm having technical difficulties, I apologize, but I will share the link with the video and many more videos of the President's Council with you in a short amount of time. And so you can watch this on your phone. I encourage you to watch the Disability and Philanthropy Forum videos. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm sorry about that. I'm pleased to moderate this important discussion today, and I'm pleased that there are so many of you here so that we can share why a disability lens matters in philanthropy and how it can strengthen your grant making. Today, I'm joined by Nikki Brown Booker of the Disability Inclusion Fund, which is administered by Borealis Philanthropy, and Ryan Easterly of the WITH Foundation. I wanted to briefly discuss disability and ableism before we dig into each of our foundations and what we're doing to support disability inclusion. According to the legal definition set forth by the ADA, a person with a disability is someone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. This definition doesn't really offer a full picture. Many people simply envision a wheelchair, but there are so many types of disabilities beyond mobility. When we talk about disability, we must remember that this includes, but is in no way limited to, mental health disabilities like bipolar, OCD, or schizophrenia, chronic illnesses like cancer, Crohn's, lupus, intellectual and developmental disabilities like autism, Down syndrome, or ADHD, hearing, speech, and vision disabilities like deaf or hard of hearing, aphasia, or blind or low vision. Disabilities can be apparent or not. They can be something a person is born with, or can be acquired at any point in life. Think about it. Disability is the only minority group that you can join at any time in life. And no other minority group included in equity and inclusion efforts is excluded. Disability cuts across class, gender, race, ethnicity, and disproportionately affects people living in poverty, women, and people of color. That said, philanthropy has some work to do to include us. I wanted us to start with each of us briefly discussing our work, the funding priorities of our organizations, and why we do this work. I was going to kick it over to Nikki to start us off.
Thanks, Jessie. So I'm Nikki Brown Booker, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am a brown woman wearing glasses with curly hair, wearing a green sweater. And I am located on Ohlone land, which is also known as Oakland, California. So I'm the program officer for the Disability Inclusion Fund. And we have developed our fund was developed by the President's Council on Disability and Philanthropy in order really to address some of the issues around the philanthropy not really serving people with disabilities like they should. Traditionally, philanthropy has mostly provided funding for service organizations and research, and disability has so much broader than those areas. And the Disability Inclusion Fund really is trying to support organizations that are focusing their work on disability justice. And we are supporting grantees that are small grassroots emerging organizations. We grant to organizations that have budgets less than 1.5 million. And by and large, most of our grantees have budgets under 500,000. And all of our organizations that we have funded to this point are disability led, and about 75% of them are BIPOC led. So we're really trying to strengthen grant making with this disability justice lens. And that's kind of our focus of what our work is. We just announced last week that we have now have 49 grantees. We have 16 new grantees from the previous year, so we're really excited about that. And as we go along today, I'll talk more about that. So let me pass it on to Ryan next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Easterly. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a Black man with some black hair, a black beard that has some gray in it. I'm wearing a black sweater, and I'm sitting in front of a white wall with a diploma on it. I come to you today from the unceded land of the Ohlone people, now known as Redwood City, California, and I'm so pleased to share a little bit more about the work of the WITH Foundation. The WITH Foundation has existed since 2002. we are established to promote comprehensive healthcare for adults with developmental disabilities in the United States. So ultimately, that means our grant making takes the form of supporting comprehensive healthcare service delivery programs that also include, in addition to primary care, programs that are intentional in providing oral health care or dental health services. We also look at supporting projects that educate healthcare professionals around how to serve adults with IDD in ways that are culturally competent, as well as use a cultural humility approach. We also do support some projects that increase the use of supported decision-making, which supported decision-making is an alternative to guardianship or conservatorship within healthcare settings. We basically will look at anything and everything that helps that adult with intellectual or developmental disabilities access high-quality healthcare. And I think really our sweet spot as far as our funding, and when we look at the projects from an overall perspective, we are very intentional in making sure that the projects and efforts that we support engage adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities as experts and leaders in the development of the projects or the leading of the projects. We also are very intentional in making sure that our funding is done from an intersectional approach. And I think when I think about why I'm passionate about this work and why I'm so pleased to serve as executive director, it's really as someone who has multiple disabilities, both apparent in the form of CP and non-apparent in the form of a mental health diagnosis. I understand how critical access to healthcare is in living our daily lives. So my view is that if we can ensure that all people with disabilities can access high quality healthcare in ways that are culturally competent and use a cultural humility approach, it will enable people to live the lives they want in their communities and make impact in their communities in the ways they want, whether it's, as artists, as lawyers, in whatever ways people choose to make an impact by ensuring that they have access to healthcare helps them do that. So that's what brings me here and brings me to the work in philanthropy. I want to give Jesse an opportunity to talk a little bit more about Ability Central and their work.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, okay. Well, as a person with disabilities, and also having a sister with disabilities, I'm passionate about working in philanthropy to direct funds supporting communication access for the disability community. Ability Central is a California-only funder, and to my knowledge, the only foundation with a mission to improve communication and information access specifically for people with disabilities. We've been around since 2010, and we've given over $11 million in grants to nonprofits serving people with disabilities. We serve as an educator, convener, and a resource, working collaboratively with our grantee partners, other funders, and the disability community to improve the field of communication and information access. Our funding priorities in the past have included training, assistive technology, and augmentative and alternative communication partners, research and innovation, networking and collaboration, and capacity building. And we also provided rapid response grants during the height of COVID-19 for communication access to our current grantees, helping them make their virtual services more accessible, which necessitated captioning and ASL on Zoom, or we even helped some of their employees get better internet while we all worked from home. And another rapid response mini grant that we gave was to K-12 educational institutions to improve the accessibility of their programs and socio-emotional learning while virtual or hybrid. As we all know, the students with disabilities are being exponentially impacted by the pandemic. So in our current cycle, we focused on training more mental health providers in communication strategies to improve access for people with disabilities. because we've also seen the pandemic, especially the isolation of it, disproportionately affect people with disabilities. And we currently have a rapid response grant for up to $5,000 open to support communication access, including ASL or captioning or audio description or translation for events and programs. And I wanted to add that, like Ryan, in our review process, we're prioritizing projects that include people with disabilities in the planning and implementation. And we require that those folks are paid for their labor. And so to ensure this, I'm looking for compensation and accommodations to be included in the budget, if not in the narrative. So I think that's a good place for me to stop. Let's move on to the next kind of question. Yeah, when considering our work, though we, the three of us, have different missions and priorities, we share a commitment to having people with lived experience of disability making and shaping our funding decisions. Could you each share more information on how you involve community voices in funding decisions? And I'm going to kick that to Ryan first.
So I'm glad to start off. I think when looking at WIT's efforts in our funding, we are very intentional in engaging people with disabilities in all aspects of our grant making, as well as within our operations. So that includes having people with disabilities on our board of directors, within our staff, on our vendor teams, as well as we also have an advisory committee that are co-decision makers in our grant making. And I think this is particularly important because sometimes when I'm talking to peers in philanthropy, they think, oh, you have a disability, so, isn't that enough? And I think it's important to understand that no one individual, no one organization can represent the entirety of all the experiences of the disability community. So I think there are ways in which the Self-Advocacy Committee challenges my perspectives and continues to push the foundation in our grant making to think more boldly about how we're providing our funding and pushing our grantees to do more and to do better. And currently the advisory committee is made up of 8 individuals from across the country that have intellectual or developmental disabilities. And as Jesse said, I think it's important we as funders know that we pay for the things we value, and lived experience should have value. So when we're looking at models that incorporate people with disabilities advising us in our work, it is important to make sure that we're compensating those individuals for their expertise and their lived experience. And I think it's especially important to uplift that for folks with disabilities, it's also important that we as funders are mindful of providing compensation in alternative formats as much as possible, because many people with disabilities depend on government programs to survive and thrive, and no one should put their lives at risk to help us do our jobs better. So in the case of WIT Foundation, we often provide gift cards. We can also discuss with particular advocates if they'd rather contributions be made to their past programs or ABLE accounts, but just consider alternative formats to just compensation, so that as individuals are helping you strengthen your grant making, they're not risking their livelihoods. Ultimately, I do want to pass it to Nikki, because Borealis and the DIF does some extraordinary work, particularly with their grant making committee. So Nikki, you can take it from here.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so we do a participatory grant making model also. And I think we're unique in that we both have advocates and funders on our grant making committee. So we do an open call for advocates because we really want to make sure that we get people in the community at the table making the decisions. And I think we really wanted to do an open call because for one thing, we are a national foundation, so we wanted to get people from all different parts of the country and representation from different parts of the country and also different areas of expertise. And so we have about 5 to 7 advocates on our committee every year, and then we also have about 5 funders, and we try to like do that a little bit of offset by having more advocates and funders to kind of, you know, diminish some of the power dynamics that might be in the room. But it's just been a really great experience having people that are really, you know, on the ground doing the work, living the experiences and making decisions. And that's something that's just really important to how we do our work. And I mean, another part of our process is that we always want to make sure that all of our applications are in many different accessible formats, so that we are really getting a cross section of groups applying for our general operating support grants. So we invite people to submit applications through our portal, through Word docs, PDF, online, through like Google Forms, or we're actually now using Jotform, which is actually a more accessible format than Google Forms. We even do phone interviews, video interviews. I mean, I've been in philanthropy for about 3 years, and it really surprises me that this has not been, you know, adopted by more foundations. I think another thing that's interesting about the way that we make our decisions is that we really kind of use a cohort lens on our work, meaning that we really want to make sure that we're trying to really develop a full range of organizations that we're supporting. So it's really important that we have a geographic diversity as well as issue diversity in the work that we're supporting. And I think that our grant making committee is like, that's something that's always kind of, you know, that they're always thinking about as we're choosing the organizations that we support. And that we're really trying to like cross seed ideas and like share knowledge with each other and really grow disability justice work as a collective rather than just silos of different groups doing their own thing. So we also are thinking about how the different groups can collaborate in their work and do think and what's missing from what our portfolio is. So we try to incorporate new ideas every time that we do grant making. So for example, this year we have invited, we have some new grantees that are really focused on climate justice, which is something that we realized that was lacking from our previous portfolio. So we've invited some grantees that are doing climate justice work, as well as some grantees that are doing reproductive justice work, which is something that was kind of missing from our prior cohorts. So that's kind of the way that we're actually really thinking about including organizations from all different areas of disability justice.
Awesome.
Jesse, as a longtime partner of Ability Central in your work, could you share a little bit more about how Ability Central includes the perspectives of people with disabilities?
Sure, thanks, Ryan. I don't know that I can say it any better than the two of you had. I feel like y'all are our model. But we do have an advisory group that it's a community advisory group comprised of individuals with disabilities to provide input for both like the unmet needs in the community to help us shape our priorities, but also they review the grants as well. And kind of like Ryan was saying, it's like, I don't know everything. We don't know everything. There's such a diversity of disabilities, you know, and it's like, I want as many opinions and lived experiences to help me shape our priorities, but also to inform the grant making that we do. And in addition, we have several board members with disabilities and then me, myself. And I think there was one other thing I remember I was going to say, but oh yeah, I think this is also a place where this is intersectional. I think in your grant applications, if, you know, in folks like needs assessments, et cetera, like, I think you should be thinking about how they know what the community needs if they don't have things like an advisory committee or people with lived experience. So I guess what I'm trying to say is making decisions for the community requires the community at the table, no matter what. And that said, our funding decisions are also informed by the information that we receive. So could you both discuss things we should be mindful of when examining our processes? I think, Nikki, I think you're up.
Thank you. I mean, I talked about this in the previous question, but I will just kind of reinforce. You know, before I was in philanthropy, I was an executive director. So I've been on the other side, right? And know how difficult it is and challenging it is to, like, one, just find a foundation or a grant that really fits the work that we were doing, which is, you know, just always a challenge. And also, you know, having application processes that weren't like, that was going to take me like, you know, a month to fill out. So, you know, and wanting so many different little pieces to their applications. So we have been pretty deliberate in keeping our applications short. We only have about 4 or 5 main questions on our application. Like I said, we also, you know, are making it accessible in every type of format possible. A new thing that we did this year is that we did a eligibility quiz, so that we didn't get a bunch of applications that didn't really quite fit our criteria, and which we've had in the past. And I think that's been really an important new piece to our work, because we don't want organizations to do unnecessary labor, right? We don't want them to spend so much time filling out applications and yet it's not the right fit for them. So I think the eligibility quiz was a good thing that we added to our application process. And we also provide a webinar about the application process, so people can really ask their questions and make sure that they really, that this is a right fit for us. You know, I think what so often happens in philanthropy is that applications are just way too complicated. There's way too many pieces. And also, you know, when they're asking, like if it's say a arts-based program, a lot of applications don't even list like disability as even a criteria on their application. So I think that's something that's, you know, we are really direct and upfront about what we're looking for, and what is important to us, and that, and you know, and we are open to people asking us questions and making sure that it is the right fit for them. I pass it on to you, Ryan.
I think in terms of list operations and kind of, we as funders know that in addition to our dollars, the questions that we ask can often help shape programming. So I think WITH is very intentional in making sure that we're asking how the leadership within an organization identifies, and specifically asking for specifics related to any historically excluded identities that are included, including disability, gender, race, sexual orientation, but making sure to be very specific to say, what does your leadership look like? And then when we're trying to gauge the community at the table or their impact in the community, making sure that we're asking for specifics about how is your organization, your efforts impacting people with disabilities? And then vice versa, if you happen to be working with an organization that is intentional in impacting people with disabilities, making sure that you're also asking them, well, how are you doing in serving people of color with disabilities, women, LGBTQ folks with disabilities? So again, making sure that the questions we help or helping support them in being more intentional of all the historically excluded identities that people with disabilities hold. I also just want to piggyback off of what Nikki shared about multiple formats and share that, you know, as a small staff foundation that WITH is, we've been on a journey in regards to our applications and our reporting as well. And although we haven't gotten to the same place as far as our application that Borealis has, we have made great steps in improving what our final reports look like. And to be frank with you, we spent much more time planning kind of what we would do if issues arose and evolving what our final reports look like than it actually took to make the change. We use a grant management system, and we thought it was going to take many long, detailed discussions with the grant management platform to have them support us in accepting multiple formats. And it ended up taking a 20-minute conversation with our account executive for them to make a small change that allowed people to upload larger files. So we now, in addition to accepting final reports in writing, also accept final reports as audio files or video files. So I want to mention that just because sometimes we get bogged down and, you know, oh, it's going to be a change, it's going to be a lot. And sometimes it's not nearly as much work as we anticipate or expect it will be. So with that, I want to turn it back over to Jessie.
Thank you, Ryan. And I think I'm correct that you're on Foundant. I just wanted to give a shout out to Foundant. We also use them. I feel like they're on their own journey, but they've been doing things to really help. So yeah, I think that I already mentioned the budget templates, but I think that's also kind of a way to guide folks. If you include on your budget template or in whatever you're requiring for the budget, but line items like accommodations, ASL interpreters, captioning, audio description. I think that's one thing that I found has been really helpful because I think a lot of people weren't including that, and I want to ensure that things are accessible. And so that's probably the only thing I have to add to that question. My next question, this might be kind of a bleed through question, but what types of funding do you feel are important to help meet the needs of the disability community and other historically excluded identities? Nikki?
Thanks, Jessie. So I think it's really important for us that our grants are for general operating support. So often, you know, grants are for very specific programming, and I think this is very true in the disability world, where it's like there's funding for like very specific parts of a program or specific programs, but not enough general operating support. So all of our grants are general operating support grants. And we also really see that there's a big need for capacity building. You know, and we are in particular, because we are really supporting grassroots and emerging groups, we really want to make sure that the grantees that we fund we're helping them build their capacity so that they are sustainable over time. You know, it happens so often that foundations will give grants, but not really support the grantees to really build out their infrastructure. And I think that's something that's really important to us. So we have a whole capacity building program built into the Disability Inclusion Fund. So we do we're going to do a whole series of workshops on financial management, a series of workshops on human resource management for our grantees. And this year we're going to do a series of workshops on conflict resolution. I think another thing that I'm super excited about that we're doing is that we're giving out what we call joy grants. We are, and it's super exciting because, when you're working with nonprofits, they're working super hard and they're often, don't take time to rest and to think about their staff and build and supporting them to just, relax and have some fun, or, or build more sustainability into the work. So this year we gave each of our organization a joy grant, a $5,000 joy grant. And I recently was visiting one of our grantees in Phoenix, and they were so excited about the idea of the joy grants. They reported back to me that what they did was they had a small staff of like 7 people, and they took everybody on their staff. They took them to a resort, and they all got to have a really fancy dinner and stay overnight in the hotel. And then the next day they all got massages and facials, and they just had fun with each other. And because of COVID, it was the first time that many of them had actually even met each other in person. It was just such a delight to hear about that, and and they just said over and over how just having the possibility of doing something like that was just they would never have thought about doing it because they've never had the extra funds to do something like that. And they spent a lot of time dreaming about what they wanted to do next with the organization. It just gave them just the space to really relax and really think about and dream with each other. So I think that's something that that's been really important that we're doing, as well as I talked about the cohort model earlier, about really building out a cohort of issues and geographic diversity of our grantees. So often what happens is that the coast get all the money, but the geographic south and the middle America doesn't get the grants, or the Midwest. So we really are very intentional in making sure that we are granting to those different parts of the country also. So I'll pass it on to Ryan now.
Thank you for sharing that, Nikki. I think I would uplift 2 additional things, both of which we've touched on, but I just want to underline them. The first is embracing more rapid response funding. With Foundation has a very traditional, we have 3 cycles a year, 2 are open cycles, 1's an RFP cycle. But for the first time in the Foundation's history in 2020, we began issuing rapid response grants, specifically related to COVID response, to support our grantees in their response to COVID for adults with IDD. And we ended up issuing 3 different rounds of rapid response funding related to COVID. And we also recently announced our awards as a result of some rapid response funding we provided related to mpox or monkeypox. So I would just underline that oftentimes we come from very rigid ideas of timelines and how things are operating, and you can move the organization, move your operations to make decisions much faster. And I think with Foundation has been on its own journey. I won't say it was easy, but it can be done, and it's one of the things we now consider a cornerstone of our operations. So just being more intentional about providing rapid response funding, as well as something we've all touched on, finding ways to support BIPOC-led organizations. With Foundation as a healthcare funder, we've always been very aware and very intentional of the historically excluded identities that adults with IDD always have. But since about 2016, 2017, we've been much more intentional in specifically supporting our applicants and our grantees and being very intentional in uplifting the leadership of BIPOC individuals with disabilities. I'll be frank with you, as someone who one of my disabilities has been lifelong, and I've been an advocate for many more years than I care to say in this webinar. Racism is a problem in the disability community, and we need grantors to be more supportive of grantees in directly addressing racism. And there are ways that you can support that as a funder, whether it's just asking the question, how are you, as someone who's serving people with disabilities, how are you being intentional in making sure that that also includes people of color, that also includes women with disabilities? And if they're fuzzy on their answers, introduce them to other organizations, other partners that can support them in being intentional in that work. There are organizations in every community, whether it's your local Center for Independent Living, your local University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disability. There are organizations in every community that if you talk to them and say, I'm trying to reach more folks with disabilities, or I'm trying to do a better job of being intentional and addressing the experiences of people of color, there are folks and organizations that will support organizations in that work. So I would just uplift that really, in order to do this work, it's important to have rapid response funding, as well as being intentional in supporting the leadership of BIPOC individuals with disabilities.
Thank you, Ryan. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip us ahead a bit, but I wanted to, is there anything else that either of you would like to sort of underline as one takeaway for today that you hope folks will walk away with? I know we don't have a chat, but I do want to give you this link. I'm going to put it in the Q&A, but I'm going to kick this over to Ryan too. But I want to, oh, can I do this? Maybe not.
Jesse, should I go ahead and answer this question, or?
Yeah, go ahead. I thought I could chat, but I can't. So never mind. I'll send it in the follow-up.
Great. I mean, I think the one thing that I would want to highlight, and it was mentioned in the video, and I just want to, emphasize this again, is that we need people that are working in philanthropy that have disabilities. And that means that foundations need to do a better job of hiring staff that have disabilities, and like recruiting, actively recruiting people with disabilities to work at every level in their foundations. If you really are serious about serving the communities that you serve, you need to have the people who are in those communities working in your offices and being part of the solution at every level. So, to me, that means that you need to have people with disabilities working within your organizations at every level.
Thank you, Nikki. Absolutely.
I guess the thing I would like to elevate is just saying, in this journey of disability inclusion and disability justice, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Start on this journey now. For too long, I've heard peers in philanthropy continue to say, oh, I don't do disability. Or even for those who have embraced and been slightly more intentional about serving and supporting disability, saying like, oh, well, race is not my problem. Race is other funders. So I'd like you to know, like, start on the journey now, because there are people with disabilities that depend on your support, depend on your role, your power and privilege as funders to help them live better lives. And especially if you're a funder that's concerned about equity and fostering equity for society as a whole, you can't do it without being intentional and including folks with disabilities. You can't do it without being intentional and making sure that we're also supporting the leadership and experiences of people of color with disabilities.
Thank you, Ryan. I think it's time for Q&A, and let me see. I know that you made a document, but let's see. Okay. It looks like Layla would love to hear thoughts on how the switch to virtual meetings has impacted equity. Personally, it's easier for me to attend meetings via Zoom instead of in person because I don't have to worry about transportation and I can take more frequent breaks. She also is giving a shout out to POTS being represented in the intro video. Yeah. I would just say we've all struggled with the switch to virtual, but for me, it's far more accessible too. It gives me the opportunity to take more breaks when I need them. And I don't know, I would love to hear if Ryan or Nikki have anything else to add. Yeah.
This is Nikki. I think one thing I would say about this, so Borealis is a virtual organization anyway, so we were already virtual from the beginning. But it's really a kind of a delight to be able to interact with people all over the country and, to see their, regional things that are happening in different parts of the country. But in terms of like going virtual and disability, I mean, I think people with disabilities have been saying this for a long time, that when they say that offices are not accessible or employers don't want to make their work more accessible and if they can't hire people, well, going virtual, we've been saying that being able to work remotely actually makes things much more accessible in a lot of ways. So I think for me, someone who's a wheelchair user, it's really nice not to have to go out in the rain when it's pouring outside to get to work, and that I'm actually more productive when I can be at home and get the stuff that I need done. And I also have everything accessible to me in my house that I can, get to. I have caregivers who can come in the middle of the day and help me do things that would be more challenging if I was in an office. So I don't know, Ryan, you might have some other thoughts about that, but to me, I actually really like the virtual world and work.
I would just say amen to everything Nikki just said. I would also share that With Foundation has also been a virtual foundation since 2017. We made the transition to being entirely virtual. And I think, especially in the pandemic, as a virtual foundation, some of the adjustments we've continued to make is being very serious about providing time for access check-ins at all of our meetings, where everyone can share what they need to be fully present in a meeting. And then I will say, kind of in general, I know in all workplaces, we constantly should be asking ourselves, could this meeting have been an email? But I would say in a virtual context, in addition to asking us that question, we should also be saying, is it necessary that people be on video? Could this video meeting be a call? Or could this, meeting continue to be an email? So making sure that we are trying to do things that address Zoom fatigue, because Zoom fatigue is a thing, it is real, and making sure that if we want people on video, that it's really necessary, and that if it's necessary, we're still providing them an opportunity to provide their access needs, just for a moment to say what they need or what's going on that would help them or might hinder them in being fully present. So that's what I would uplift.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Nikki. How is Borealis and WITH supporting those without 503c3 fiscally sponsored grantees?
So I would say in WITH's case, it's exactly that. We've become much more intentional in supporting programs that are physically sponsored. And I think Nikki can share even more about Borealis, but in WITH's case, we've been much more intentional in supporting programs that are physically sponsored.
Yes, I think that's the same thing for about Borealis. We do support we do have fiscally sponsored grantees. I think one of the issues, obviously, for the organization that's fiscally sponsored is how much the fiscal sponsor takes as part of their cut. And I think that, when we're thinking about our grant sizes with fiscally sponsored organizations, we really do think about maybe we might increase their grant size slightly to kind of compensate for the cut that the fiscal sponsor takes. We've also had a few organizations that are really new, really emerging. They haven't even quite gotten to the place where they have their 501c or are still looking for fiscal sponsors. So we've talked to a few groups where we're like, these are sponsors that we've worked with that already have kind of a disability lens in their work, because that's another thing that we've noticed is that not fiscal sponsors really understand disability, so we have some that we work with that really get it. So we have recommended, we've given some referrals to organizations that have fiscal sponsors that really understand the disability perspective.
Thanks, Nikki. Thanks, Ryan. 6:29, or sorry, that's what time it is here. I don't think we have time for any other questions unless people want to stay on. I know Ryan and Nikki, I think do we want to give it 5 minutes to answer the other questions? And folks can leave if they have no questions. Don't feel pressured to stay. I see there's one on here. As a parent of a young adult with IDD and seizures, I'm sad to see the movement of parents trying to start with what they call intentional communities. She would love the panel's opinion personally or from our organizations. I'm not sure. What do y'all think?
So I will share from, as I'm talking to other peers in philanthropy, and sharing WITH's journey and kind of my personal perspective of this work, I do think it's important to distinguish the differences between a self-advocate and a family advocate. And we all have families, and families are very important, and they can be vital advocates for people with disabilities. But there are sometimes differences between the perspectives of self-advocates and family advocates. For a more well-known example, look no further than Britney Spears' situation. Granted, she has much more power and resources and money than most folks with disabilities, but to her family, they thought she was in a healthy, good situation, and she disagreed. So I do think it's important as funders that we are very intentional in understanding the differences between the self-advocate perspective and family advocate perspective. And when it comes to communities and housing situations, again, and you can cite my bias because I do have lived experience of disability. I look for ways of, is it that individual's choice to live in a community? Some individuals with disabilities might choose to live in intentional communities, but some individuals will not. So it's about, are you accounting for the differences between self-advocate perspective and family advocate? And as long as you're prioritizing the perspective of that individual, then people have the right to live the lives they want to live. And as long as we're sure that we're prioritizing their perspective, let people live how they want to live.
Thanks, Ryan. One quick question for Nikki. How is the 1.5 million and under threshold to support smaller nonprofits determined? What was the rationale for setting that amount versus lower or higher?
Good question. I think that, we wanted to, there's a lot of, big disability organizations around the country that tend to always get the grants, and not to say that they're not worthy and they're not doing good work, but we really, when we were thinking about setting our criteria, we're like, we want to find those organizations. We want to find, we don't want to, it's not that we don't want to support those organizations, that's not what we wanted to prioritize. So I think that's what helped us come up with the 1.5 million. We wanted to support emerging new groups, but also there are lots of disability groups that have been around for a while, but just haven't been able to break that threshold of getting into kind of like, as groups have their own developmental, like ways. It's like, sometimes it's just really hard to get out of that kind of like, get to break that threshold to get a bigger funding. So we figured 1.5 would be like kind of the smaller mid-range organizations, and that's kind of how we came up with that number. And like I said, we do have some organizations that are pretty close to that cap, or maybe a little bit over between 1 and 1.5 million, but by and large, most of our organizations are under 500,000 that we are supporting.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. Well, I think that wraps us up. Thank you, Ryan and Nikki. Thank you, NCG. Thank you, Philanthropy California, etc. This was a great. I've learned things. I hope you did. And thank you so much for all of your time this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.